This is the story of something that really happened. A disturbing, true camping horror story I'm going to tell you. So listen carefully, because once I start, you won't be able to stop thinking about it. It happened to my friend Josh and me, just 2 summers ago. We had planned a simple camping trip in the woods near Lake Marlow. Nothing big, just 2 guys trying to escape city noise, wanting to sit by the fire, eat grilled sausages, and maybe fish a little. We had both been there before years ago with our families. It was peaceful, quiet, no cell phone signals, no internet, just trees and sky. Exactly what we needed. We packed everything: tent, food, flashlight, knives, sleeping bags, and even a small emergency radio. Drove out early on a Friday morning and reached the spot by noon. It looked just like we remembered, maybe even better. Green all around, the sound of birds, and that fresh smell of pine and earth. We picked a good spot near the lake, where the water sparkled under the sun. We set up our tent, made a fire pit, and got comfortable. The first day was normal. We cooked some hot dogs, watched the sunset, and laughed like kids around the fire. But that night, things started to feel strange. Around 2 a.m., I woke up suddenly. It was freezing cold, even though it had been a warm day. The tent was shaking slightly, like a soft wind was brushing against it. But I couldn't hear any wind outside. It was dead silent. No crickets, no owls, nothing. Just silence. If you've ever been in the forest and heard nothing at all, you know how wrong that feels. I sat up and noticed Josh was already awake, sitting up too. He whispered, "Do you hear that?" I said, "Hear what?" He replied, "Exactly." We both sat there, frozen, listening to the silence. Then we heard it, crunch, like footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps, coming from the woods behind our tent. Then a pause, then another step. Not an animal, not the light rustle of a deer or fox. This was 2 feet. A person. Josh slowly reached for the flashlight and pointed it at the tent entrance, but he didn't turn it on yet. We both waited. Another crunch. Closer now. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest like it was trying to escape. Josh whispered, "Who's out there?" Of course, no answer. He turned on the flashlight and unzipped the tent quickly. We both jumped out, pointing the light in every direction. But no one was there, just trees, still no sounds. We checked around the tent. Nothing disturbed. No prints, no broken branches. Just that strange feeling like someone had been watching us. We stayed up for the rest of the night by the fire, not saying much. The silence lasted until just before dawn, and then, as if someone flipped a switch, the forest came back to life. Birds chirped, bugs buzzed. It was like whatever had been there left with the night. We tried to laugh it off the next morning, saying maybe it was just an animal or we imagined it. But both of us knew what footsteps sound like. That wasn't in our heads. The second night is when things got worse. After dinner, Josh went to use the bathroom area we made about 50 feet into the woods. He took the flashlight and disappeared into the dark. I stayed behind by the fire, poking at it with a stick. I remember looking up at the stars, thinking how peaceful it all looked. Then I heard running, fast, crashing footsteps. Josh came sprinting, back into the camp, pale and shaking. I stood up and asked what happened, but he couldn't talk right away. He was gasping, looking over his shoulder like something had chased him. After a few minutes, he said, "There's someone out there, just standing, watching. I said, "A camper?" He shook his head. No, this guy was wrong. Tall, too tall, wearing something like animal skin or something. But it wasn't clothes. And his face. He stopped and just shook his head. Again, now I was scared too. We both stayed close to the fire that night, keeping the axe and knives close. We didn't sleep. Around midnight, we heard it again. Footsteps, this time from a different direction. Then another set, like two people walking slowly around our camp. We pointed our lights and yelled, "Who's there?" No answer. But then, a whisper. From the darkness just outside the firelight, a voice, low, dry, like someone who hadn't spoken in years. It said, "Don't look." We froze. I looked at Josh. He was crying. The fire suddenly flickered hard, like a wind blew through. But there was no wind. And we heard laughter. Not normal laughter. Twisted, broken laughter. Like someone trying to pretend they were human and didn't quite know how. Josh stood up with the axe and screamed, "Get out!" and threw the axe into the trees. Silence again. We didn't know what to do. We couldn't leave in the dark. The trail back to the car was too dangerous at night. We just sat and waited for the sun. Every so often, we'd hear soft breathing, like someone standing right behind us, but when we turned, nothing. That morning, the woods were normal again, but something had changed in us. We packed up without saying a word and got out of there fast. But here's the part that still haunts me. When we got back to town, we looked up the area around Lake Marlow, and we found a forum, one that had stories, weird ones. People who had camped there and left early. People who said the same thing. Someone or something watching them, whispering to them. But then one post stopped me cold. It said, "If you hear it say, don't look, don't listen, that's how it finds you." I never looked. Josh did. To this day, he doesn't talk about what he saw, but he doesn't sleep much either. He sees things, in mirrors, in windows. He moved out of the city, lives alone now. No phone, no internet, just quiet. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we stayed one more night, or if I had looked too. So yeah, that's the story I had to tell you. Real, true, and still fresh in my mind. Next time someone invites you to go camping near Lake Marlow, maybe think twice. Some places just don't want you there. This is the story of something that still gives me chills whenever I talk about it. A disturbing, true camping horror story I'm about to tell you. It happened to my friend Ethan and me, and to this day, we don't fully understand what we saw out there, but we remember every second. It was the summer of 2018. Ethan and I had just finished our first year of college. We wanted to take a break, disconnect from everything, phones, social media, people. So we planned a weekend camping trip deep in the Pine Ridge Forest. Not the part where families go, but a remote trail Ethan found online. It was supposed to be peaceful, untouched, and quiet. We packed everything in Ethan's old truck: tent, food, flashlights, a couple of knives, and even a small revolver his dad insisted we take, just in case. We laughed about it at the time, if only we knew. The first day went perfectly. We hiked in about 4 miles, found a perfect spot near a little stream, and set up our camp. The trees were thick, tall, and the place felt completely cut off from the world. We built a fire, made hot dogs, and shared stories under the stars. It was the kind of night you never forget, but not for the reasons we thought. It was just after midnight when I woke up. Something wasn't right. I didn't know why at first, but I was cold. Really cold. Colder than it should have been. The fire was out. I sat up in the tent and looked over at Ethan. He was already awake, staring at the fabric of the tent with this blank look on his face. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. I listened. At first, nothing. Then, I heard it. Crunch. Crunch. Soft, slow footsteps, not leaves rustling, not an animal. This was a person walking carefully, deliberately, circling the tent. I froze. We didn't say a word, just listened. The footsteps stopped behind the tent, dead silent. Then came this long, slow breathing, like someone was standing inches from the fabric, trying to sniff us out. I grabbed my flashlight and turned it on. Big mistake. As soon as the light hit the tent wall, we saw a shadow, a tall figure, still as stone, just standing there. Ethan whispered, "Who's out there?" No answer. I yelled, "We're armed, get out of here." Still nothing. Then the shadow moved, quickly. It stepped back into the trees, and the sound of footsteps faded. We waited another 10 minutes before stepping out with our knives and the revolver. Nothing, just trees and the dark. We stayed up the rest of the night, backs to the fire, watching. We should have left in the morning, but we didn't. That was the second mistake. Ethan tried to laugh it off at breakfast. "Probably some random hiker messing around," he said. I wasn't so sure. There were no other cars where we parked. No one was supposed to be out here but us. Still, the day felt normal. We hiked a bit, fished by the stream, and tried to enjoy ourselves. But something about the forest felt different. Quieter. Too quiet. That evening, we were making dinner when we noticed something weird. A stack of small rocks had appeared about 30 feet from our camp. 6 stones, stacked neatly. Ethan swore they weren't there before. "Maybe you just missed them?" I said, trying to keep calm. "No," he said. "They weren't there. We knocked them over. That was mistake number 3. That night, everything went wrong. It started with whispering. I thought I was dreaming at first, but it kept getting louder. A voice. No, voices. Soft. Low. Right outside the tent. They weren't speaking English. I don't know what language it was. It didn't sound human. I reached for the flashlight, but it didn't turn on. Dead batteries. Ethan tried his. Same thing. Then the breathing came back, right at the tent wall, followed by a low, gravelly laugh. I yelled, "Back off! I have a gun!" and fired a warning shot through the top of the tent. Silence. We ripped open the tent and looked around with the dim light from Ethan's phone. There was no one there, but the rock pile was back. And this time, there was something on top. A tooth. Just sitting there. We grabbed our stuff and made a run for it. No tent, no food, just our backpacks and weapons. We ran with the phone light bouncing through the dark forest, hoping we were headed the right way. And then, we saw something we can't forget. About 100 feet ahead, a figure stood in the trees. Tall, thin, with limbs that were too long. Its head was tilted sideways like it was trying to understand what we were. The phone light barely touched its face, but what we saw didn't look human. Its eyes reflected red. Its mouth stretched wide, too wide, like it had been cut open. It didn't move, just stood and stared. We turned and ran another direction, heart pounding so hard I thought I'd pass out. We didn't stop until we hit the dirt road near where we parked. And even then, we didn't speak. We got in the truck and drove. The road back was silent. No music, no words, just headlights cutting through the trees. When we got to town, we stopped at a gas station and sat there for an hour, trying to breathe. Ethan looked at me and said, "We're never talking about this again." But I can't forget it. A few weeks later, I looked up Pine Ridge Forest, found an old article from the 80s. Hikers gone missing. Same area. Campers found their tents slashed open, belongings untouched. Local tribes said the area was cursed. A spirit in the woods, one that plays with people's minds before it takes them. It always starts with the silence, then the footsteps, then the whispering. And if you don't leave by the third night, you don't leave at all. We only stayed 2. So yeah, that's the story I had to tell you. A true one. And if you think you're brave enough to camp where no one else goes, remember, there are things out there that don't care if you believe in them or not. They just want you to listen. This is the story of something that happened to my cousin Daniel. I'm not making any of this up. It's real. And even though it happened over 10 years ago, it still creeps me out every time I think about it. It's a disturbing true camping horror story, one that Daniel only told a few of us, and I've never looked at camping the same way since. It was the summer of 2011. Daniel and 3 of his friends, Luke, James, and Ryan, decided to go on a weekend camping trip. They were all 22 at the time, young guys, full of energy, and looking for a little adventure before life got more serious. They chose a place called Hollow Creek Forest, about 2 hours outside the city. It wasn't a popular spot. In fact, Daniel had only heard about it from an old neighbor who used to go hunting there years ago. He said it was quiet, off the beaten path, and had a nice little lake in the middle of the woods. They arrived late in the afternoon, parked near Saitiaks, a half-broken wooden fence, and hiked about 2 miles in. They found a flat, grassy spot near the lake and set up camp. Everything was normal. The sun was shining, birds chirping, the water was still and clear. A perfect, peaceful spot. The first night went fine. They built a fire, roasted marshmallows, and stayed up laughing and sharing dumb stories. Around midnight, they crawled into their tents, Daniel and Luke in one, Ryan and James in the other. But sometime after 2 a.m., Daniel woke up. He didn't know why at first. There was no sound, no movement, just this strange feeling. You know that feeling when someone's watching you? Like your body knows something your eyes haven't seen yet? He sat up in the tent and looked around. Luke was still asleep. But then, Daniel noticed something outside, through the thin layer of the tent fabric, a light. Not firelight, not a flashlight, but a soft bluish glow, almost like moonlight, but brighter, and it was moving. He unzipped the tent slowly and peeked out. The light was floating about 30 feet away in the woods, just hovering, maybe 5 feet off the ground. No sound, no heat. Just this glowing orb like a giant firefly, but colder. Daniel stared at it, frozen, and then the light flickered. It blinked once, then twice. Then it moved quickly behind a tree and disappeared. He thought maybe he imagined it. Maybe it was a trick of the eyes or something reflecting from the lake. He lay back down but didn't sleep. The next morning he told the others. They laughed it off, said he was tired or dreaming, but he knew what he saw. And what's worse, he noticed something weird just outside their camp. A small pile of feathers, like bird feathers but perfectly clean. No blood or guts. Just white and gray feathers arranged in a circle, about the size of a plate. None of the guys could explain it. They moved the feathers, threw them into the woods, and went about their day. They hiked, swam in the lake, and even caught a few fish. But Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. That night, things got much worse. Around 1 a.m., Daniel woke up again. But this time, he knew something was wrong. There were noises outside. Footsteps, slow and soft, crunching leaves. Then whispers, not full sentences, just murmurs, like someone was speaking in another language. One voice at first, then two, then more. He sat up and shook Luke awake. "Do you hear that?" Daniel whispered. Luke blinked and nodded. "Yeah. What the hell is that?" They stayed silent, listening. The whispers grew louder, then suddenly stopped. Daniel slowly unzipped the tent. He looked out into the trees, but it was pitch black. He reached for his flashlight and turned it on, and that's when he saw it. Standing just at the edge of the trees was a figure, a tall, thin man. But something was off. His limbs looked too long. His arms hung past his knees. And his face, it wasn't right. Pale, smooth, and almost blank. Like a mask with just two black holes for eyes. It stood perfectly still, staring. At the tent, Daniel couldn't speak, couldn't move. The flashlight started to flicker. Then, the figure stepped back into the darkness and vanished. He zipped the tent shut in a panic. A few seconds later, they heard James and Ryan shouting from their tent. Something had scratched their tent wall, deep, claw-like slashes that tore through the fabric. The four of them jumped up, grabbed whatever they could, and ran toward the trail. They didn't even pack up. They just ran. Halfway back to the truck, Ryan fell. He'd tripped over something. When they turned to help him, they saw what it was. Another pile of feathers, just like the one from the morning, this time with a dead bird lying in the middle. Its eyes were missing. They didn't stop after that. When they finally reached the truck, Daniel looked back at the trailhead. He swears he saw the figure standing, there again. Just watching them. No face, no expression, just watching. They drove back to the city in silence. None of them said a word the whole way home. Later that week, Daniel did some digging. He found out that Hollow Creek Forest used to be part of an old settlement back in the 1800s. There were stories of a man who lived alone in the woods, a strange man accused of witchcraft. The townspeople tried to drive him out, but he vanished one night without a trace. After that, people said the woods were cursed. Strange lights, vanishing hikers, whispering voices, all things people claimed over the years, but no one believed. Daniel believes. He's never gone camping since. None of the four have. And when he tells the story, he always ends it with the same line. If you're ever out in the woods and you see a soft blue light, don't follow it, don't stare at it, and whatever you do, don't speak to it, because it sees you, and it remembers. So yeah, that's the story. A disturbing true camping horror story. I wasn't even there, and it still haunts me. If you ever plan to go camping somewhere off the grid, just remember, there are places out there where something else walks among the trees. Something that doesn't want to be seen, but loves it when you do. This is the story of what happened to my friend Ben, who still can't explain what he saw that night. It's a true camping horror story, and every time he tells it, you can tell he's still not sure whether it was a nightmare or something real. It's disturbing, and if you're someone who loves the outdoors, you might want to think twice before heading out into the woods after hearing this. Ben and a group of his friends, Tom, Rachel, and Sarah, decided to go camping in the Coastal wilds of Vermont. They were all college students, eager to get away from the hustle and bustle of city life and spend a few days in nature. They found a quiet spot near an old secluded campground called Whistler's Hollow. It was deep in the forest, miles away from any roads or neighbors. It was supposed to be the perfect escape. They arrived late in the afternoon, parked their cars at the edge of a narrow trail, and carried their gear into the woods. There was no one else around. It was just them and the sound of birds calling from the trees. Ben said it felt almost like they had stepped into another world, a peaceful, untouched corner of nature. They set up camp by a small creek that ran through the forest. The water was clear and cold, the kind that made your feet feel alive when you dipped them in. As the sun set, they lit a fire, roasted marshmallows, and told stories. Ben said it was the perfect night, one of those moments when everything feels right. But as the darkness deepened, Ben started to notice something off. It wasn't anything obvious, just a feeling. The air seemed a little too still, and the forest around them felt a little quieter than usual. He shrugged it off, thinking he was just being paranoid. After a few hours, everyone crawled into their tents to sleep. Ben and Tom shared one tent, while Rachel and Sarah slept in another. The night was silent, except for the occasional rustling of leaves outside. Ben was drifting into sleep when he heard it. A soft thud, like something heavy had dropped nearby. His eyes snapped open. At first he thought it might have been a deer or maybe a tree branch falling, but then he heard it again, a thud, followed by the sound of something dragging along the ground. He lay completely still, trying to ignore it. The last thing he wanted to do was make a fuss, but the sound was getting closer. It wasn't like anything he had ever heard in the forest before. Ben whispered to Tom, "Hey, did you hear that?" Tom groggily answered, "What?" "The sound. Something's out there." Tom muttered something incoherent and went back to sleep, but Ben couldn't. His heart was pounding, and he felt that terrible nagging sensation that something was wrong. The dragging sound was so close now that he could hear it clearly through the tent walls. Ben slowly unzipped the tent and poked his head out. The moonlight was faint, but he could just make out a shape moving near the edge of the camp. It wasn't human, at least not in any way he could recognize. It was tall, and it had this strange bent posture. The silhouette was almost like that of a person, but the head was too large and the limbs were too long. It was moving slowly, dragging something behind it. Ben's breath caught in his throat. His first instinct was to shout out to his friends, but something held him back. The figure was moving toward the fire, and then it stopped. For what felt like an eternity, everything was still. The only sound was the crackling of the fire. Then, without warning, the figure dropped whatever it was dragging, something that looked like a bundle, and disappeared into the trees as silently as it had come. Ben's heart was racing. He couldn't just let it go. He knew he had to check. Slowly, He crept out of the tent, making sure not to wake Tom. He moved cautiously toward the spot where the figure had been. What he found made his blood run cold. There, near the fire, was a pile of what appeared to be animal bones, jagged, broken, and scattered across the ground. And lying on top of them was a small, tattered doll, its eyes sewn shut with string. It looked old, ancient even, like something from another time. There was no logical reason for it to be there, and Ben could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He took a step back, unsure of what to do. That's when he noticed something else. At the edge of the camp, near the trees, there were several more figures standing motionless in the shadows. They weren't moving, but they were there, watching. Ben's heart pounded in his chest. He ran back to the tent, grabbed Tom by the arm, and shook him awake. "Tom, wake up! We need to go now!" Tom, still groggy, looked at him like he was insane. "What the hell, Ben? It's the middle of the night. What's wrong with you?" But Ben wasn't having it. He pulled Tom out of the tent, forcing him to get dressed quickly. They ran to the other tent and shook Rachel and Sarah awake, telling them they had to leave. At first, they thought it was some kind of joke, but the look on Ben's face made them realize it wasn't. The four of them scrambled to pack up their things, but as they turned to leave, something stopped them. The figures in the woods. There were more of them now. Several shapes standing in the shadows. Ben could see their eyes glinting in the moonlight. They were too far to make out details, but their presence was undeniable. Ben's voice shook as he whispered, "They're coming. We need to go. Now." They didn't even bother to take their bags. They grabbed whatever they could and ran down the trail. The only sound was the pounding of their feet on the ground and the occasional crack of a twig behind them. It felt like they ran for miles. But when they finally reached the car, the sun was starting to rise. They jumped in, locked the doors, and sat there, breathing heavily. None of them spoke for a long time. Ben glanced out the window. The woods were calm again, but he knew something was wrong. He could still feel those eyes on him, watching from the shadows. They didn't go back to that forest. They never spoke of it again, but I know it still haunts them. Ben still doesn't camp anymore, and I don't blame him. If you ever find yourself near Whistler's Hollow, just remember this story, because there are things in the woods that you can't explain, things that watch, things that wait, and sometimes they want you to see them.